faithfully sharing value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we're diving into the book Lu Xun, a truly brilliant biography of Lu Xun. Its author, Lin Shanji, is a famous scholar and expert on Lu Xun. People usually get to know Lu Xun through his works and others' commentaries. He could depict complex human nature with piercing insight, and his social critiques were sharp, incisive, and downright fiery. This version of Lu Xun is deeply literary, philosophical, and warrior-like, but it lacks approachability, feeling distant from ordinary folks. So how was such a Lu Xun forged? Actually, what shaped this image was precisely his unique life path. Lu Xun puts Lu Xun back into everyday life, letting you understand him from a fresh angle by tracing his journey. To cover Lu Xun's experiences, we can roughly split them into three parts. First is the growth period. We'll explore the people and events that influenced Lu Xun's youth. What role did this play in shaping his character? Then comes the dormant period. What was Lu Xun up to before the new culture movement kicked off? Finally, the explosive period, from the new culture movement to Lu Xun's death, covering his literary journey and social critiques. Let's start with Lu Xun's growth period. In anyone's growth, the biggest influences boil down to two things: family of origin and educational experiences. Lu Xun was no exception. First, his family of origin. Born on September 25th, 1881 in Shaoxing, Zhejiang. His family was well off, thanks to his grandfather Zhou Fuqing. Zhou passed the provincial exam at 30 and the imperial exam at 33, joined the Hanlin Academy, and served as a county magistrate. Back then, passing the imperial exam brought tons of privileges and perks, enough to keep the whole family comfortable. So Lu Xun's childhood was secure, and Zhou Fuqing hoped his grandson would live well. When Lu Xun was born, he was named Zhou Zhangshou, John like the camphor tree, shou for longevity, symbolizing health, long life, and peace. The Zhou Shiren we know is a name he adopted later. But life's unpredictable at age 13. Lu Xun faced a family crisis, all stemming from his grandfather. Turns out, Zhou Fuqing always felt his official post was too small, but being old, he couldn't climb higher, so he shifted his hopes to his son, Lu Xun's father, Zhou Fengyi. Helplessly, Zhou Fengyi was unambitious, trying the exams over and over, but only achieving the rank of Shuchai. Zhou Fuqing got anxious. During one imperial exam, he tried to bribe the examiner, but it was exposed and he was arrested. The case was reported to Emperor Guangxu, who was furious and sentenced Zhou Fuqing to Zhanjianhu, equivalent to today's suspended death sentence. To rescue Zhou Fuqing, Zhou Fengyi ran around everywhere, spending all his savings and selling off land, finally managing to rescue Zhou Fuqing. But Zhou Fengyi also fell ill. As the eldest grandson and son, Lu Xun had to step up and shoulder the family's responsibilities. Zhou Fengyi was ill for 2 years and passed away in 1896. At 16, Lu Xun handled his father's funeral arrangements. This experience made his view of the world somewhat gloomy, and two things were particularly unforgettable. The first was treating his father's illness. The Zhou family hired the best traditional Chinese doctor in Shaoxing. This old doctor made things mysterious, actually prescribing pills made from broken drum skin for the patient to eat, and demanding Lu Xun to find a pair of original couple crickets as a medicinal ingredient. Lu Xun fulfilled all these bizarre requests, but his father still died, making Lu Xun skeptical of traditional Chinese medicine. So later he studied Western medicine, becoming even more disdainful of TCM. He criticized TCM all his life, and when he got sick, he absolutely refused to see a Chinese doctor. The second event was the property division in the Zhou family after his father's death. Relatives bullied Lu Xun's family, and as they had no backbone left, giving them a small and poor house. Lu Xun refused to sign, receiving harsh reprimands from the elders. which deeply shocked his heart and made him see the hypocrisy of the world. Later, when recalling this experience, he personally said, "Is there anyone who has fallen from a well off family into hardship? I believe that on this journey, one can probably see the true face of people." After the property division incident, Lu Xun felt he couldn't stay in Shaosong anymore, so he decided to study in Nanjing, thus beginning his educational journey. Next, I'll talk about Lu Xun's educational experiences. This experience brought Lu Xun closer to revolution and started his opposition to tradition. First, it's important to note that Lu Xun went to a Yang Shuatang in Nanjing, so-called Yang Shuatang, were Western-style schools established by the Qing government according to modern standards. What were their characteristics? Compared to traditional private schools that only taught the 4 books and 5 classics, serving as preparatory schools for imperial exams, Yang Shuatang offered courses like arithmetic, physics, and foreign languages, cultivating modern talents. Um, From this perspective, wasn't Lu Xun quite visionary? Actually, for scholars back then, the imperial exams were the true path. Only those without prospects would attend Western-style schools. They would go to Western-style schools. So, when Lu Xun made his decision, an elder said, "The Zhou family is a scholarly household. You attending a Western-style school brings shame to us. No, you can't use the name Zhou Zhangshou anymore." She gave Lu Xun a new name, Zhou Shiren, meaning cultivating people takes decades like planting trees. To pursue his education smoothly, Lu Xun had to agree. From 18 to 22, Lu Xun stayed in Nanjing for 4 years. This was the first stage of his educational journey. During this time, Lu Xun attended 2 schools, Nanjing Naval Academy and Mining and Railway School. It was also in Nanjing that his intellectual world first opened up. The key to his thoughts was Yan Fu's translation of Evolution and Ethics. In Lu Xun's era, the Qing government was weak and incompetent. Foreign powers carved up China. Intellectuals began to ponder, where exactly did the problem lie? Yan Fu was one of them. From 1896, Yang Fu began translating Evolution and Ethics by British biologist Huxley. Though called a translation, it included many of Yan Fu's own views. Through Huxley's words, he told the Chinese people that the world today follows the law of the jungle. Might makes right. Only by striving to strengthen themselves and learning from the West could the Chinese avoid national extinction. When Lu Xun came to Nanjing to study, this book was at its peak popularity. He spent 500 yuan to buy it, which was quite expensive at the time. You should know, a pound of pork cost only a few dozen yuan back then. Lu Xun opened Evolution and Ethics and was immediately captivated. Evolution and Ethics opened a window for Lu Xun, letting him know only through continuous progress can humanity survive and develop. China's problem lies in conservatism, ignorance, and lack of progress, which greatly shocked Lu Xun. From then on, Lu Xun accepted the evolutionary concept of survival of the fittest. Having accepted this evolutionary concept, Lu Xun developed the idea to pursue advanced civilization by studying abroad. His educational journey thus entered its second stage, studying in Japan. Studying in Japan enabled him to establish his career, using literature to enlighten China. In March 1902, at the age 22, Lu Xun secured a government scholarship to study in Japan. Lu Xun stayed in Japan for over 7 years. This was decisive for his life path. Here we'll cover 3 important things. First, using Japan as a medium to learn Western civilization. After the Meiji Restoration, Japan extensively translated Western works, covering philosophy, literature, science, and more. When Lu Xun was studying abroad, the representative works of important Western thinkers and scientists were basically all available. After overcoming the language barrier, Lu Xun voraciously read Western classics, with the most influential being Thus Spoke Zarathustra by German philosopher Nietzsche. In the book, Nietzsche proposed the philosophy of the Superman. What is the Superman? Simply put, the Superman possesses immense spiritual power, opposes idol worship, questions traditional morality, and aims to overturn all old values. In Lu Xun's view, China needed such a Superman to break the stagnant traditional culture and rouse the people. The second thing, Lu Xun met his best friend for life. Sheng had just arrived in Japan, and Lu Xun entered Tokyo Kobun Academy. It was a school established for Chinese students with a 2-year curriculum teaching Japanese and scientific knowledge. At Kobun Academy, Lu Xun met Shu Shoushang. Shu was 2 years younger than Lu Xun and also from Shaosong. Meeting an old acquaintance in a foreign land, coupled with their similar personalities and interests, they quickly became close friends, maintaining their friendship for life. It can be said that Shu Shoushang played a significant role in Lu Xun's life journey. When in Tokyo, whenever he had free time, Lu Xun would go to Shoushang to discuss what ideal human nature should be like. What is lacking in the national character of the Chinese people? These discussions became the beginning of Lu Xun's reflection and criticism of the national character. To Shu Shoushang introduction, Lu Xun joined the Restoration Society. The main members of the Restoration Society, Kai Wanpei and Qu Jin, both from Zhejiang, advocated overthrowing the Qing government and establishing a republic. Lu Xun was known as a revolutionary. Tracing back to the source, it actually lies here. In 1906, Zhang Taiyan, who participated in founding the Restoration Society, went into exile in Japan. Lu Xun and Shu Shoushang became his disciples, joining the Zhan school. Zhang Taiyan was a cultural master, and even more remarkably, he was also a revolutionary. Zhang Taiyan often commented on state affairs and developed his own theory of social evolution, which Lu Xun greatly admired. Under his guidance, Lu Xun laid the foundation for his later studies in Chinese classics and gained many skills in debate. Throughout his life, Lu Xun criticized countless people and had little affection for so-called national scholars, but he always maintained respect for Zhang Taiyan alone. In June 1936, when Zhang Taiyan passed away, despite being seriously ill, Lu Xun wrote an article reminiscing about Zhang's revolutionary spirit. However, Lu Xun's understanding of revolution was somewhat different from others in the Restoration Society. The Restoration Society promoted violent revolution and was keen on assassinations. They hoped to assassinate several key officials, then coordinate with uprisings to overthrow the Qing government. Lu Xun, however, believed that if the conservative and ignorant national character couldn't be reformed, neither violent revolution nor assassinations could fundamentally change China. So, how to reform the national character? This brings us to the third thing, abandoning medicine for literature. In June 1904, Lu Xun graduated from Kobun Academy and chose to study medicine because he learned that many scientific technologies and ideas were introduced to Japan through modern medicine, thereby changing Japanese perspectives. Therefore, reforming the national character through medicine was a good approach. In September, Lu Xun arrived in Sendai, a city in northern Japan, and entered Sendai Medical School to study. At this school, Lu Xun met a highly responsible teacher, Fujino Genkuro, who gave Lu Xun great help. However, in the end, Lu Xun still gave up studying medicine. The most direct reason for this was that in a classroom in Sendai, he had to watch slides about the Russo-Japanese War with his Japanese classmates. The numb and dull Chinese people in the slides deeply stimulated him. Lu Xun later recalled his thoughts at the time, saying, "For any weak and ignorant people, no matter how physically robust or strong, they can only be meaningless material for public display and spectators." How many die from illness isn't something to consider unfortunate. Since reforming the national character through medicine didn't work, what to do then? Lu Xun thought of literature and art. He had this idea. In July 1906, Lu Xun withdrew from Sendai Medical School, and shortly after returning to Tokyo, he brought his brother Zhou Zuoren to Japan. The brothers and Xu Shushang together began trying to awaken the people with literature and art. At that time, many people were doing similar things. Liang Chao proposed the idea of introducing excellent Western novels to spread Western civilization, change Chinese people's perspectives, and promote reform. Lu Xun agreed, but his approach was a bit different. At that time, the literature translated in was mainly from Britain, America, and France, but Lu Xun particularly valued literature from Eastern European nations like Hungary, Bulgaria, and Czechoslovakia. He felt that these were oppressed peoples sharing a common fate with the Chinese, so their literary works could better resonate with the Chinese. Additionally, Lu Xun also valued Russian literature because Russia, like China at the time, was under autocratic rule, and the spirit of resisting autocracy and enslavement in Russian literature was lacking in China and worth learning. In 1909, Lu Xun and Zhou Zuoren jointly published their first translation work, Anthology of Foreign Fiction. This book collected 16 foreign short stories, with 7 from Russia and 3 from Poland, accounting for 2/3 of the content. An anthology of foreign fiction didn't sell at all back then, only 4 copies in Tokyo. Lu Xun also considered starting a magazine, but that failed due to lack of funds. In short, his first attempt was unsuccessful. In August 1909, Lu Xun returned to China. His growth period ended here. The next 9 years were Lu Xun's dormant period. During this dormant period, Lu Xun essentially stopped literary translation. So what did he do instead? Before the 1911 revolution, he returned to his hometown Zhejiang and became a teacher there. By then, Xu Shousheng, who had returned before him, was already the academic dean at a teacher's college in Hangzhou. Recommended by Xu Shousheng, Lu Xun also joined this school to teach physiology and botany. A year later, Lu Xun returned to his hometown, serving as a teacher and supervisor at Shaoxing Middle School. After the 1911 revolution broke out, he ran a newspaper in Shaoxing, commenting on governance. In January 1912, the Republic of China was established, ending 2,000 years of imperial rule. At this moment, Lu Xun felt optimistic and wanted to contribute something. At the time, Wang Jinfa, the military governor of Shaoqing's revolutionary government, was a Restoration Society member who knew Lu Xun. After becoming governor, he implemented reforms. Lu Xun immediately felt the stagnant city of Shaoxing had become revitalized and full of energy. Soon, he and Zhu Zuoren started a newspaper. Lu Xun frequently documented various issues and criticized the military government. His intention was that the new revolutionary regime, facing many problems, could be supported by newspapers conveying public opinion and supervising governance. But contrary to expectations, Wang Jinfa was angered by criticism and threatened to arrest Lu Xun. Lu Xun himself observed that the 1911 revolution hadn't changed China's social structure or national character. Old revolutionaries like Wang Jinfa abused power, tolerated corruption, and rejected criticism. Everything reverted to old ways. Deeply disappointed, Lu Xun shut down the newspaper and no longer wanted to stay in Shaoxing. Where to go? At this moment, he received an invitation from Xu Shushang. After the Republic's founding, Xu Shousheng joined the Ministry of Education in Beijing. Subsequently, he recommended Lu Xun to Education Minister Cai Yuanpei. So, in May 1912, Lu Xun arrived in Beijing and took on a role as an inspector at the Ministry of Education. basically an assistant level position. Back then, the Ministry of Education was just part of the bureaucracy. Everyone was trying to climb the ladder, with hardly anyone genuinely focused on education. Given the environment, Lu Xun couldn't muster any enthusiasm. He often hung out with Xu Shousheng, dining, drinking, and strolling through Liulichan. When alone, Lu Xun dove into studying ancient texts and even Buddhist scriptures, and time just flew by. By 1917, Lu Xun was 36, stuck in Beijing for 5 years, and his future seemed totally predictable. Slowly grinding out seniority at the Ministry of Education, spending an obscure life, nobody expected things to suddenly change. It all started with a magazine called New Youth. New Youth was founded by Chen Dushu and was originally published in Shanghai. In early 1917, Chen Dushu was invited north to become the Dean of Humanities at Beijing University. The New Youth magazine also moved to Beijing. New Youth's mission was to introduce Western civilization, criticize traditional culture, and wake up the Chinese people to change China's backward state. To do this, Chen Dushu published 2 articles back to back. The first was Hu Shi's preliminary proposal for literary reform, pushing for using vernacular Chinese instead of classical Chinese in writing. The second was Chen Dushu's On Literary Revolution, declaring the complete overthrow of rotten classical aristocratic literature. Suddenly, the vernacular literature movement gained huge momentum, bringing together professors like Chen Dushu, Hu Shi, Li Gaziao, and Qian Xuantong from Peking University. But the awkward thing was, while they had all the theories and slogans for literary revolution, they didn't have any solid works to show for it. In One day in August 1917, Qian Xuantong visited Lu Xun. Both were students who'd studied in Japan and knew each other well. Qian Xuantong knew Lu Xun had literary talent and wanted him to write something. But Lu Xun was feeling down, and his first reaction was, "Is this even meaningful?" He gave an analogy of an iron house. Lu Xun said, "China is like an iron house where everyone's asleep, unaware they're suffocating. If you wake some up but can't break the house, you're just making them suffer before death. Why bother? It's better to die in your sleep," Qian Xuantong replied. "Since someone's awake, there's hope to break the iron house." And it was that word, hope, that sparked Lu Xun's passion. He accepted Qian Xuantong's invitation and joined New Youth magazine as an editorial board member. So, in May 1918, Lu Xun published the short story Diary of a Madman in New Youth. The first time he used this pen name, Lu came from his mother's surname, while Xun means swift or to dash. Thus, Diary of a Madman carried dual significance. For modern Chinese literature, it was the first vernacular short story, holding an unshakable place in literary history. For Lu Xun personally, it marked his entry into an explosive creative period. This explosive period can be divided into 3 phases by residents: Beijing, Xiamen-Guangzhou, and Shanghai. First, the Beijing period. Statistics show that from 1918 to 1926, before leaving Beijing, Lu Xun published 25 short stories, including masterpieces like Konyiji, The True Story of Akui, Regret for the Past, and The New Year's Sacrifice. These stories fiercely criticized feudal ethics and national character flaws, while exposing young intellectuals' pain and confusion, deeply resonating with readers. Of course, Lu Xun wasn't fighting alone. At that time, New Youth operated with rotating editors, 7 board members each taking turns to edit an issue. As an editor, Lu Xun worked in sync with New Youth colleagues, maintaining a particularly harmonious relationship with Hu Shi. While Hu Shi criticized Confucian-centered feudal ethics, Lu Xun distilled its essence as man-eating in Diary of a Madman. In Kong Yuji, Lu Xun exposed how pitiful and ridiculous scholars were when limited to the 4 books and 5 classics. Lu Xun criticized Chinese people's lack of ambition, ignorance, and laziness. In single quotation mark, the true story of Og Q, he characterized this national flaw as skilled use of spiritual victory, self-delusion. In turn, Hushi frequently engaged with Lu Xun. Hushi held Lu Xun's fiction in high esteem. In his diary, he wrote that Lu Xun possessed both discernment and creativity, calling him a genius. In 1922, Hushi wrote an article summarizing New Culture movement achievements, naming Lu Xun as the most representative fiction writer, the only one. During this period, Lu Xun and Hu Shi collaborated closely, jointly advancing the New Culture movement as youth icons. Sadly, their friendship didn't last. They gradually drifted apart and ultimately parted ways. The rift between Lu Xun and Hu Shi actually stemmed from ideological differences. Lu Xun believed that Hu Shi only wanted an elitist approach. His articles targeted intellectual elites and high-ranking officials, hoping for top-down social change, but he lacks sympathy and understanding for the lower classes. On the contrary, Lu Xun thought that enlightening the masses and awakening them was the urgent priority. These ideological differences inevitably led to real-world conflicts. On this point, even Lu Xun couldn't avoid common pitfalls. He had to take sides, form cliques, and escalate the disputes. At that time, Beijing's cultural and educational circles were divided into two major groups. The first included Kai Yuanpei, Lu Xun, Zhou Zuer, and Tian Xuantong, etc. Older individuals who studied in Japan or France, and because many were from Zhejiang, they were called the Zhejiang faction. The other group had Hu Shi, Xu Jimo, Liang Shikyu, younger people who studied in Europe or America, hence called the Euro-American faction. During the New Culture movement, the Zhejiang and Euro-American factions jointly opposed the conservatives, faithfully sharing value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're diving into the book Human Lu Xun, a truly brilliant biography of Lu Xun. Its author, Lin Shanji, is a famous scholar and expert on Lu Xun. People usually get to know Lu Xun through his works and others' commentaries. He could depict complex human nature with piercing insight, and his social critiques were sharp, incisive, and downright fiery. This version of Lu Xun is deeply literary, philosophical, and warrior-like, but it lacks approachability, feeling distant from ordinary folks. So how is such a Lu Xun forged? Actually, what shaped this image was precisely his unique life path. Human Lu Xun puts Lu Xun back into everyday life, letting you understand him from a fresh angle by tracing his journey. To cover Lu Xun's experiences, we can roughly split them into three parts. First is the growth period. We'll explore the people and events that influenced Lu Xun's youth. What role did this play in shaping his character? Then comes the dormant period. What was Lu Xun up to before the New Culture movement kicked off? Finally, the explosive period, from the New Culture movement to Lu Xun's death, covering his literary journey and social critiques. Let's start with Lu Xun's growth period. In anyone's growth, the biggest influences boil down to two things: family of origin and educational experiences. Lu Xun was no exception. First, his family of origin. Born on September 25th, 1881, in Shaoxing, Zhejiang, his family was well off thanks to his grandfather Zhou Fuqin. Zhou passed the provincial exam at 30 and the imperial exam at 33, joined the Hanlin Academy, and served as a county magistrate. Back then, passing the imperial exam brought tons of privileges and perks, enough to keep the whole family comfortable. So Lu Xun's childhood was secure, and Zhou Fuqing hoped his grandson would live well. When Lu Xun was born, he was named Zhou Zhangshao, John like the camphor tree, Shou for longevity, symbolizing health, long life, and peace. The Zhou Shiren we know is a name he adopted later. But life's unpredictable at age 13. Lu Xun faced a family crisis, all stemming from his grandfather. Turns out, Zhao Fuqing always felt his official post was too small, but being old, he couldn't climb higher, so he shifted his hopes to his son, Lu Xun's father, Zhou Fengyi. Helplessly, Zhou Fengyi was unambitious, trying the exams over and over but only achieving the rank of Shuchai. Zhou Fuqing got anxious. During one imperial exam, he tried to bribe the examiner, but it was exposed and he was arrested. The case was reported to Emperor Guangxu, who was furious and sentenced Zhao Fuqing to Zhang Hao, equivalent to today's suspended death sentence. To rescue Zhao Fuqing, Zhou Fengyi ran around everywhere, spending all his savings and selling off land, finally managing to rescue Zhou Fuqing. But Zhou Fengyi also fell ill. As the eldest grandson and son, Lu Xun had to step up and shoulder the family's responsibilities. Zhou Fengyi was ill for 2 years and passed away in 1896. At 16, Lu Xun handled his father's funeral arrangements. This experience made his view of the world somewhat gloomy, and two things were particularly unforgettable. The first was treating his father's illness. The Zhu family hired the best traditional Chinese doctor in Shaoxing. This old doctor made things mysterious, actually prescribing pills made from broken drum skin for the patient to eat, and demanding Lu Xun to find a pair of original couple crickets as a medicinal ingredient. Lu Xun fulfilled all these bizarre requests, but his father still died, making Lu Xun skeptical of traditional Chinese medicine. Later, he studied Western medicine, becoming even more disdainful of TCM. He criticized TCM all his life, and when he got sick, he absolutely refused to see a Chinese doctor. The second event was the property division in the Zhou family after his father's death. Relatives bullied Lu Xun's family as they had no backbone left, giving them a small and poor house. Lu Xun refused to sign and was severely scolded by the elders. This deeply shocked him, making him see the hypocrisy of the world. Later, recalling this experience, he personally said, "Is there anyone who has fallen from a well-off family into hardship?" I believe that on this journey, one can probably see the true face of people. After the property division incident, Lu Xun felt he couldn't stay in Shaoxing anymore, so he decided to study in Nanjing, thus beginning his educational journey. Next, I'll talk about Lu Xun's educational experiences. This experience brought Lu Xun closer to revolution and started his opposition to tradition. First, it's important to note that Lu Xun went to a Yang Shuitang in Nanjing. So-called Young Shuitang were Western-style schools established by the Qing government, according to modern standards. What were their characteristics? Compared to traditional private schools that only taught the 4 books and 5 classics, serving as preparatory schools for imperial exams, Young Shuitang offered courses like arithmetic, physics, and foreign languages, cultivating modern talents. From this perspective, wasn't Lu Xun quite visionary? Actually, for scholars back then, the imperial exams were the true path. Only those without prospects would attend Western-style schools. They would go to Western-style schools. So when Lu Xun made his decision, an elder said, "The Zhou family is a scholarly household. You attending a Western-style school brings shame to us. No, you can't use the name Zhou Zhangshou anymore." He gave Lu Xun a new name, Zhou Shuren, meaning cultivating people takes decades like planting trees. To pursue his education smoothly, Lu Xun had to agree. From 18 to 22, Lu Xun stayed in Nanjing for 4 years. This was the first stage of his educational journey. During this time, Lu Xun attended 2 schools, Nanjing Naval Academy and Mining and Railway School. It was also in Nanjing that his intellectual world first opened up. The key to his thoughts was Yan Fu's translation of Evolution and Ethics. In Lu Xun's era, the Qin government was weak and incompetent. Foreign powers carved up China. Intellectuals began to ponder, where exactly did the problem lie? Yang Fu was one of them. From 1896, Yanfu began translating Evolution and Ethics by British biologist Huxley. Though called a translation, it included many of Yanfu's own views. Through Huxley's words, he told the Chinese people that the world today follows the law of the jungle. Might makes right. Only by striving to strengthen themselves and learning from the West could the Chinese avoid national extinction. When Lu Xun came to Nanjing to study, this book was at its peak popularity. He spent 500 yuan to buy it, which was quite expensive at the time. You should know, a pound of pork cost only a few dozen yuan back then. Lu Xun opened Evolution and Ethics and was immediately captivated. Evolution and Ethics opened a window for Lu Xun, letting him know. It can be said that during his Shanghai period, Lu Xun became an essayist. Lu Xun's essays can be roughly divided into two categories. One type is practical articles criticizing the Kuomintang authorities and national character flaws, directly targeting pain points people avoid confronting. The other type consists of personal polemics. These writings reflect Lu Xun's mindset in his later years. He could be extremely caustic toward people and things he disliked. First, I'll discuss essays criticizing the KMT and national character. Logically, these differ, but Lu Xun combined them. Why? Because he realized the so-called national flaws resulted from millennia of autocratic rule. They were the ruler's achievements. Thus, only by eliminating autocratic rule and introducing modern civilization could these flaws truly be eradicated. This shows Lu Xun's depth. He didn't simply blame the people, but targeted autocratic rulers with his criticism. For example, when the September 18th incident erupted in 1931, the KMT pursued non-resistance, losing northeast China. Afterward, Japan further infiltrated North China. In January 1933, Japanese troops attacked Shanhaiguan. Panic gripped Beijing. Students demanded postponed exams and early winter break to flee. This sparked public outrage. Major newspapers in Beijing and Shanghai published articles condemning students as cowards, fleeing instead of fighting during national crisis. Public opinion urged that at this critical moment, students, as national pillars, should share the crisis and resist invaders. But Lu Xun disagreed. He wrote essays like On Facing Calamity and Defense of Fleeing to express his view. Lu Xun noted that after September 18th, Northern students protested in Nanjing, demanding resistance. What happened? Authorities ordered suppression, causing student casualties. Having learned this lesson, students realized authorities wouldn't resist invasion. So, when enemy troops approached, fleeing was their only option. Lu Xun's view was clear. Students fleeing showed cowardice, but who created this? Isn't it the Kuomintang authorities' non-resistance policy? Well, he said, if given lion-tiger education, students would use claws and teeth. If given cattle-sheep education, in critical moments they'd still use pitiful hooves. But what kind of education have we been given? Not even small hooves. When disaster strikes, only rabbit-like fleeing remains. Instead of criticizing this, public opinion mocks students. Isn't this bullying the weak? Lu Xun's essays criticizing national character generally followed this logic. In another essay, Sand, he stated it more explicitly. Since modern times, from Yangfu to Sun Yat-sen, all criticized Chinese people for caring only about personal gain, lacking collective spirit, like ununifiable sand. Lu Xun pointed out that keeping people scattered like sand was actually intentional by rulers. He said wealth comes from ordinary people. If they unite, extracting wealth becomes hard. So rulers must turn them into sand. Using sand control tactics on people, all China becomes scattered sand. Having covered Lu Xun's first essay type, let's discuss his second, polemics with fellow intellectuals. These articles often stemmed from cultural differences. Shanghai marked Lu Xun's polemical peak. He showed no mercy toward people or ideas he disliked. This was, like, it's It's through these debates, Lu Xun offered profound insights still relevant today. Of course, polemics meant fiery language. Lu Xun's harsh words isolated him from many. Here's an example: Lu Xun's criticism of Shizekun. From Henzhou Zhejiang, 20 years younger than Lu Xun, he was already a renowned writer. Early in his career, Shizekun actually had good relations with Lu Xun. His magazine Shandai published 6 of Lu Xun's essays, including In Memory of To Forget. So how did they end up feuding? It began in September 1933 when a newspaper asked Xi to recommend books for youth. She recommended Zhuangzi and selections of refined literature, both ancient texts, precisely what Lu Xun opposed youth reading. To him, ancient books were like opium, overdosing rigidified minds, creating feudal remnants. So he was dissatisfied with Shizet-kun's recommendation, but she only suggested those books to improve youth's literary cultivation, nothing more. Would Lu Xun care about this? He wrote an essay accusing Xi Zhechun of advocating revivalism that would corrupt youth. Notably, this article was signed Feng Jiyu, meaning remnant of the feudal demon realm. This was clearly satirizing Xi Zhechun. Facing such criticism, Xi felt wronged and defended himself. Lu Xun immediately counterattacked. Their back and forth escalated until Lu Xun called Xi a playboy of the foreign concessions, turning minor disagreement into personal attack. This reveals Lu Xun's interpersonal style in later years. But if you think Lu Xun spent his later years only arguing angrily, you're mistaken. His sharpness targeted what he saw as wrong. Toward family, friends, and young writers, he showed deep warmth. Let me share examples. First, his relationship with Zhou Zuoren. Lu Xun nurtured Zhou Zuoren completely. From daily life to literary career to marriage, their bond was once extremely close. During the New Culture movement, the Zhou brothers, one writing fiction, one essays, were shining literary stars. But in 1923, fierce conflict erupted. Lu Xun moved out of Beijing's Baoduan residence. The rift remains an unsolved mystery in modern literature. Afterwards, they completely severed ties. Still, Lu Xun cared for his brother. In 1925, Lu Xun wrote the story Brothers, subtly expressing willingness to help if Zhou faced difficulties. He repeatedly urged Zhou through relatives to leave Beijing. Lu Xun felt Beijing's conservative atmosphere and Zhou's weak personality made him vulnerable. Sadly, Zhou didn't listen. After war broke out, Zhou became a collaborator, yet he privately appreciated Lu Xun's concern. Later, he expressed this gratitude in his memoir, Zhitang's Recollections. This was for his brother. For his son, Lu Xun was even more devoted. In 1929, Xu Guangping bore Lu Xun a son. Since born in Shanghai, he named him Zhou Haiying. At this time, Lu Xun was already 49 years old, truly having a child late in life, so he was extremely excited. Whenever friends visited, he would always carry Zhou Haiying out, his delight visibly overflowing. According to Xu Guangping's recollections, Zhou Haiying was sickly and constantly coughed at night. Lu Xun hired a nurse specifically for him, yet still worried and often neglected his own exhaustion from writing overnight to personally care for the child. As Zhou Haiying grew older, he demanded bedtime stories every night. This task naturally fell to Lu Xun, the writer, who spent considerable time gathering material and crafting stories. Lu Xun also selected toys for Zhou Haiying, never tiring of it. Some felt Lu Xun invested too much energy in parenting and urged him to rest more and not spoil the child. Lu Xun disagreed and even wrote a poem in response. The poem contained a famous line, "Heartlessness doesn't make a true hero. How can loving one's child make one less of a man?" Lu Xun believed real heroes must be affectionate, and true gentlemen must cherish their children. Beyond being a brother and father, Lu Xun was also a mentor. Shanghai then attracted literary youth nationwide who lived in poverty while pursuing ideals. Many sought Lu Xun's help, which he always provided. His care for Xiao Jun and Xiao Hong best exemplified this warmth. Xiao Jun and Xiao Hong were both from northeast China. After the September 18th incident, while fleeing to Qingdao, Xiao Hong completed her novella, The Field of Life and Death. Living in destitution, they reluctantly asked Lu Xun for help. Lu Xun greatly admired Xiao Hong's work and helped contact publishers. In 1934, they moved from Qingdao to Shanghai, becoming Lu Xun's closest young friends. They visited Lu Xun constantly. After his death, Xiao Hong wrote, remembering Mr. Lu Xun, describing him through her eyes. Lu Xun loved smoking, walked briskly, laughed brightly, and was humorous, kind, and meticulous. When Xiao Jun and Xiao Hong stayed late, or it rained, Lu Xun would have Xu Guangping call a car, insisting on paying the fare. Lu Xun also had excellent aesthetic taste. Once, Xiao Hong wore a red blouse and brown skirt, asking if it looked good. Lu Xun honestly said no. He then shared clothing coordination tips. Lu Xun told Xiao Hong that a red blouse should be paired with a red or black skirt to look good. With a coffee-colored skirt, it appears visually muddy. Afterward, Lu Xun commented on Xiao Hong's usual attire, making her realize he wasn't only serious and sharp. In truth, Lu Xun had a zest for life and warmth, enjoying interactions with youth. Those like Yu Dafu, Zheng Zhenduo, and younger writers Ba Jin and Hu Feng all received his mentorship. His friendship with Rushi and Yin Fu of the Five League of left-wing writers martyrs was particularly well known. After their execution, Lu Xun risked writing in memory of to forget, expressing his feelings for these young writers. After the League's founding, Lu Xun remained its spiritual leader, hailed as the commander of left-wing literature. This was inseparable from his care and support for young people. It can be said that in his later years, Lu Xun had become an idol for Chinese youth. On October 19th, 1936, Lu Xun passed away at his Shanghai home at age 56. His death shocked the entire nation. Sun Qingling, Kai Yuanpei, Mao Dun, Zhou Zuan, and others formed a funeral committee. Thousands attended: friends, scholars, writers, students, movie stars, ordinary citizens, and workers. Lu Xun's coffin was draped with a banner bearing three characters: Soul of the Nation. He was initially buried at International Cemetery, now 1920 Hangzhou Road. In 1956, his tomb moved to Hongkou Park, now Lu Xun Park, where his statue in familiar seated pose stands today. His birth-death dates are inscribed below the statue. To this day, people bow at his tomb and offer fresh flowers. Well, that concludes Human Lu Xun. That concludes our interpretation of this book on Lu Xun. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll see you tomorrow.